a major crime today in the streets of Khartoum, when we have those wonderful generals fighting in the city. It's just criminal, in my view. But also, I think that is changing the scene. We need to talk also about what's happening here. First, Abdallah, welcome, and thank you for joining us. And you have been in the middle of this. And I noticed, Dr. Hamdok, you have not talked much about what's been going on. You have been quite careful in dealing with the delicate situations, and but I think it's time to talk now. Yeah? We should.
Okay. Moh, thank you very much for inviting me to this event. You know, your theme of this year is about global Africa. But I think because of your commitment to home, and we say charity starts at home, I would like to think you had this special session inserted in this discussion, which is really about the globe. But I think it's also relevant.
Okay.
Absolutely.
What he's saying is that I'm slightly corrupt. Fair enough. In his diplomatic way. Okay.
You know, Moh, these are sad days for Sudan.
Yeah.
More than 3 years ago, when I heeded the call to go back home and lead the transition, there were hopes for Sudan. Things were rising. Let me start by saluting the young women and men who sacrificed their life to topple the longest dictatorship in our recent history. I'm a born optimist, eternal optimist. And let me turn now to the issue of transition. You know, transitions by their nature, they are non-linear. They never travel in a straight line. They have their ups and downs. But I think the Sudan transition this time is very complex, very different, has so many issues with it. Well, you know so well, after independence of Sudan in 1956, of course, many of our brothers and sisters, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa, they think Ghana was the first independent African country, 1957. We were there just a year before. But I think for the more than 6 decades, we did not manage to get our national project right. This time in 2019, when we toppled this last dictatorship, it was the third uprising. You know, we toppled Aboud, General Aboud in 1964, Nimeri in 1985. Those transitions came about in a different environment to this one. Paradoxically, each time we had a military dictatorship, the next one that followed is almost double the period.
More brutal.
And absolutely, and more brutal. They perfect the game. Aboud lasted for 6 years. Nimeri was 16 years. This last one was 30 years.
So you can see the Burhan or Houmetti to stay for 60 years now?
God forbid. But I think history will probably, yes. Yeah. But I think, let me just briefly maybe point out some of the difficulties of this transition and challenges we have faced.
Take us first through the timeline. Revolution started on 28th of December. Was it 28th of December when it started?
Yes.
It took about 3-4 months until Bashir was kicked out. And then we had the sit-in, the great time, revolutionary time in Khartoum, people singing, writing poetry, people embracing each other, people from Darfur, from the south, from the north, getting together, discovering. And it was interesting to hear that people in Khartoum did not have enough information about what was happening in Darfur. It is very interesting to see the social media at the time. Then we had the massacre of the young people at the time, and the military thought by killing 200-300 people that they're gonna really kill the revolution and establish the rule. That did not happen. And the street went out again. Was it the 30s when we had the biggest, biggest demonstrations? And then the soldiers had to sit and negotiate with the civilian. And I have my friend Labbat here. Where is he?
Yeah, he's somewhere here.
Where is Labbat?
Musa.
He fell asleep. We're talking about you, Labbat, and you fell asleep. So he was in the middle of the negotiation. And then you agreed some form of uncomfortable marriage between civilians and the military. And you were brought by the civilians as their candidate to be prime minister. Tell us about the challenges you had when you became, in this uncomfortable situation. You have the military here in the Supreme Council. You are a prime minister, senior position. I'm not sure how much power really you had.
Small.
Little. Important areas were not under your control. Judiciary, which is utterly corrupt, was not under, you could not do anything about it. Changing the laws, the whole area, defense, security, of course, that's also police, everything is out. Tell us about this period. How,
sure.
Please.
Before getting into that,
let
me just maybe on the timelines.
Okay.
You know, we think what the time of Bashir when he was toppled in April 2019, that was an event.
Yeah.
But the revolution was an accumulative revolution. Started in 1989 with the coup itself.
Yeah.
And then the resistance that followed. So many uprisings. 1990, the 28 soldiers who were massacred. Then the war in Darfur, the 2013, and a number of other uprisings. So this has been an accumulative struggle of the Sudanese people, culminated in the downfall of the regime in April 2019. The timeline that followed, you perfectly outlined it. We came to office, as I said earlier, heeding the call of the nation. We formed the first government in September. We came against a very challenging background in every aspect of life. On the political front, we had to face huge expectations, and rightly so, by our people.
Of course.
Because they sacrificed a lot. They expected, like the following day, everything should be right.
Improved. Yeah.
Improved. Of course, there is a need to appreciate that there is almost, as you rightly put it, destruction in every sense, mismanagement in every aspect. But also within the political challenges, we had to manage not only expectations, but also ability to stay the course, a unified front, continue the consensus that toppled the regime. It's a very challenging one.
Yeah.
Because everybody was behind that flag. But when the regime was overthrown, everybody went and lined up behind their party or region or other flags. So the seeds of the fragmentation started there. And this was a very challenging task. Then also the other elements of the democratic dispensation. We had a task of organizing the Constitutional Conference. You know Moh so well, for the 6 decades long, we did not have a permanent constitution till now. It's a big deficiency. Then the other one, the issues of election law, organizing the election itself and all that. Nothing in that happened.
And you had no money.
The economic front, and this is probably one of the major challenges we faced, a collapsed economy. You name it, all the macro indicators were wrong. High inflation, interest rate, budget deficit.
And sanctions.
On tax, Sudan was collecting less than 6% of tax to GDP. You cannot run a decent government on that. Then the structural issues of the economy. And on top of this, the debt, mounting debt of over 60 billion. Then the sanction compounded all this. But also the ability to agree in that fragmented space on an economic program. You know, we have a broad spectrum of views. And you know it very well, Moh. On our extreme left, there are people who don't want to hear the word World Bank. And the right, and then anything in between. How do you manage this? An ability to form a program, put it together. It was a huge challenge. Then on top of this, the transition took place against civil war in the regions, in Darfur, in the Nuba Mountains, in the Blue Nile.
There is another 11 militias or 12
well,
armed movements.
Yes, I actually don't call them militias because this is an issue which also points to the complexity.
I'm not a diplomat or prime minister, so I just, yeah.
The complexity of the relationship between the center and the periphery.
Yeah.
Its dynamics, its issues. There are issues relates to underdevelopment, marginalization, managing of diversity, and all these issues. So the first task, we started the negotiation with these armed groups in Juba. It has its own challenges. They are fragmented, there are so many, which meant at times you have parallel negotiating tracks. But also, this was part of regional and international interest and issues. But we managed. We had a partial agreement, which we call the Juba Agreement, brought most of them in. The other challenge is the restructuring and building state institutions. As you rightly put it, you mentioned the judiciary. It's not the judiciary only. We inherited a dysfunctional institution, 30 years of destruction. Civil service, public sector, on all its, even the private sector. More than that, the political parties themselves, civil society institutions were all destroyed. Parties were fragmented as a deliberate policy. It's not because they are agreeing on this or that. Then we had so many other challenges, not to mention we are very unlucky. After 6 months of the transition, the whole world was hit by COVID.
Oh.
And you can imagine, on top of it was also the floods. Again, it's resonated very well with the discussion on and the discourse on the climate change and all that. It's a plate full of challenges, and we had to manage this in an agreement, in a power-sharing agreement with the military. The Prime Minister had very little, probably, control over so many issues. We don't have money. Thanks to the international community, they came to our rescue, but it was...
Labad did not do a good deal, did he? He gave too much power to the military.
I don't think so, Moh.
We'll give you a chance to comment, okay?
You know, when Labad, carrying the flag of the African Union under the leadership of my brother Musa, and the Prime Minister of Ethiopia, also the IGAD and all that, when they started engaging the Sudanese project, they came at a time followed the massacre of June 3.
Yeah.
Just barely 1 month and a half after the change, we had that very, it's a massacre, at least to say about it. And the whole thing collapsed. But
and
because of the revolution was very light.
I mean, you trying to access funds from the IMF or the World Bank, I think that was a nightmare.
It is, because you see, we were under sanctions for close to 30 years.
So they cannot deal with you because
No,
you're
they
under
can't touch
sanctions.
us. They can't touch us
Yeah.
because first, to start any step in this, we had to clear the sovereign debt of the multilaterals, MDBs, the World Bank, IMF, and the African Development Bank. And here I would like to thank really the effort exerted by our partners in many parts, but the US played a major role in this. France, you were part of that, the UK, and many others, Sweden, Norway.
We appreciate the positive role
Ireland.
played by Macron and
Absolutely.
Charles Michel and various
we
people.
had to
German.
pay close to 3 billion debt for these multilaterals. So that would pave the way for these institutions to allow the sanctions to be removed. But also it has a very serious impact on the debt issue.
Yeah.
As I said, we inherited about 60 billion of debt. For
But
us,
among all these difficulties, it seems to me that the main problem probably which caused the setback was the division among the civilian forces at the end. Yes, you had economic problems. It took a long time to convince Trump to lift the sanctions when Sudan is no longer a state supporting terrorism. Actually, they put the guys in prison. And there's no reason not to lift the. But anyway, the transactional approach of Trump and his administration took a long time, which is not helpful.
over a year. And also,
not helpful at all.
we had very serious.
Because you cannot speak to the IMF or the World Bank before you remove the sanctions.
Absolutely.
So, and then you needed to also, remove the support for fuel and for, because these were requirements also for the World Bank and the IMF to reform the financial support for some of essential stuff, which of course is not very popular. And
that's a very interesting issue, of the economic reform program which we embarked on as part of discussion with the IMF, which helped us to reach what we call the fast tracking of the program. UCT, which allow us to reach a decision point in HIPIC in 6 months, which is a record time. And for that to happen, we had to take very serious decisions. The subsidy issues was there from the 70s, not only started with Bashir. Successive government, and this is true all over the world, government are very sort of caution about taking a decision on subsidy.
Yeah.
But for us, it was very clear. The subsidy was supporting a very small segment of our population. So the egalitarian issue is not there, but also it's absorbing every penny that we have, which should go to education, to health. We remove subsidy from just fuel, not bread, not electricity.
That was very brave, but an accurate
Absolutely,
decision.
it was very brave, but also we had hoped that if the support from the multilaterals would come easily and fast, that would cushion. We have no illusion that that reform program.
I think there is a point here for the various discussion really about how the slow movement, the slow action of the international multilateral organization, etc., can really undermine the democratization process. It's just they have so many, and it is the system. It is not individual. I mean, I had an endless discussion with David Malpass and Kristalina, and those guys have tremendous amount of goodwill towards Sudan.
This is
but
resonated very well.
Their hands are tied, how to get things. The whole system really need, and I hope our friends in later sessions will carry on this discussion.
That's why I'm saying even this is on Sudan, but it resonates very well and talk to the issues that we are been discussing today.
So that happened, and then the fragmentation of the civil society, which that's your base, your support. People brought you to power. Those guys really fell apart.
It's true.
And that enabled now the militaries to start to play games again, I think.
You know, from day one, I have been impressing on the civilian side of things that it was our unity that toppled the dictatorship. And we should not lose track on that.
Yeah.
We should have been staying the course as a unified front. And I went into so many successive initiatives. I put an initiative in June 2021 about bringing everybody together. And I was telling them time and again that to protect the transition, we need to stay unified. But you see, as I said earlier, the moment the change happened, everybody went behind their flags.
Yeah.
And they started, of course, demanding all kind of
Everybody wants to have a minister in the cabinet, to have this.
That is part of it, but also the programs themselves. They were very fragmented.
Some people left, some people go right, some people...
Exactly.
And when the whole process, you just need a democratic country. And after you get a democratic country, you guys fight among yourselves.
And this is against a background of the legacy of the former regime and also the inability to appreciate the strengths of the former regime operatives.
Of course.
We were working so hard trying to dismantle the party state in favor of a nation state. This is not an easy thing.
Yeah.
We had needed a unified political front to push for that. But I think, I don't know, this is probably an issue which is not unique to Sudan. I would like to think also many of the, maybe even the Arab Spring, probably experiments, which point to the fact that the change has happened, but you were facing what I could call an incoherent political leadership, a flat structure that takes forever for any decision to happen or agree on anything.
I put all agree on he must fall. تسقط بس.
Yes.
But what after the fall of the dictator?
Yes.
We don't have an agreement, and that's a problem.
In a large degree, there were so many slogans.
Yeah.
I was handed in objectives of 14 objectives for the transition.
Then there was this creeping coup then.
Yes.
For a few weeks preparing the theater for their coup. And I thought maybe you got wind of that. You felt that...
it was an open secret.
Yeah.
We call it the creeping coup.
Yeah.
And we discuss it and all that. Actually, 2 months before the coup of the October, 25th October.
And you were placed under arrest.
I was arrested first and then...
you put under house arrest after that.
Yes,
Okay. So you're still arrested, but maybe in a better environment.
Yeah, it's like a prison. I have no access to any...
to anybody and everything.
It's very monitored and controlled access.
Right. Then the street erupted.
Yeah.
Okay. And a lot of pressure on the soldiers. And they came back to you and you negotiated some other form of power sharing. And you came back to be prime minister. A few weeks later, you saying that was not a deal, really.
Yes, true. You know, this is a very interesting subject. And
would like to hear this.
Me and you, we talked about this for a number of occasions. You know, when I reached the agreement with the military after the coup, after 1 month of house arrest, I had 4 objectives of this. Number 1, to stop the bloodshed. And it happened. Number 2, to put a brake on the coup itself, in the escalation, and essentially to protect the achievement of the 2 years and a half.
Yeah.
Yes. We did a lot of good things. I don't want to mention them today. I think it is known to everybody what we have achieved in a record time there. And then third, to again start the transition, release the political detainees, and also reverse the decisions that were made by the military in the first week of the coup. All that happened for more than a month. We signed this agreement on 21st November. It went all the way up to end of December. We did all this. But I started seeing they were reneging on that agreement. And the stroke that broke the camel back was the 30th of December, when killing started to happen again. They killed 6 of our demonstrators, of our young, talented people.
So the killing did not stop, actually.
Yeah, well, for a while after I signed the agreement,
but then it started again.
But then it started again. And I felt, well, this is something which
That is not I signed
and
up.
I made it very clear from day one I took office that the moment I feel that I would not be able to fulfill and work on the things that I committed myself to do, I will leave.
Okay.
I never came there with an ambition to have office or anything. I just heeded the call, and the time that I felt this is not working, and I resigned. I told the Sudanese people that we did good things. We did maybe we got it right, we got it wrong in some areas, and this.
I think there's some.
I resigned and left.
Yeah, Abdullah. I think there's some important lessons to draw out of this, and I understand you're writing your memoirs. Is that correct?
Yes, I'm writing, if you could call it memoir or a book or whatever, but this is with the support of quite a number.
Yeah, but I think it is really important to draw the lessons from this.
Absolutely.
Not only for Sudan, but for the rest of the countries. And the one lesson, I don't know about you, the one lesson I draw from all this, never trust the military. That is the one lesson I trust. So my brother Musa, with all those crazy soldiers running around and never trust those guys. Never trust. Power and money are toxic, and never trust those guys.
Well, you see,
That is natural. I don't know what you're going to write in your book, but anyway.
No. I think this is an excellent thing. I think, I guess, the Sudanese experience on transition is not only relevant to Sudan. It's relevant to many places in Africa, and I would like to think even the global south. So the lessons that could be teased out of this,
Right.
we are in the thick of writing this. But if I can just mention a few of them, you are absolutely spot on the military issue.
Okay, we agree at least in one thing here. Good, excellent.
Okay. You see,